super excited. As always, our last episode of every season is with the author of the book that we've been spending the last couple weeks talking about. And so we are super, super excited to have our special guest joining for this last episode, Chris Wilson, who is the author of The Master Plan, My Journey from Life in Prison to a Life of Purpose. I'm Teresa Young, who will be one of your co-moderators today, along with Frederick. It's been so wonderful to spend these last couple of weeks together, and we're excited to invite you all in. Feel free to use the chat box on your right on YouTube if that's where you're joining us. Feel free to drop either where you're joining us from or perhaps a word that you're feeling in this moment. And then also just encourage you to keep chatting with one another, with us. Stephanie Kimball, who's our program lead, is tuned in with you in the virtual chat, and we'll be pulling over some of the comments as we kind of go, because you all are included in on this experience with us today. As you all settle in, we'll just share a little bit about you, about TRF, and what you can expect, and then we'll get started. So the Trauma Research Foundation is started by our two co-founders, Bessel van der Kolk, who's the author of The Body Keeps the Score, and Leisha Skye, our CEO. And we are dedicated to supporting and growing a community of clinicians, researchers, educators, and people whose lives are affected by trauma. We offer a variety of programs, so please come and visit our website, everything from conferences to our institute program for certificate programs. We have our community programs that's offered without cost, like the book club, as well as our research program where we share grants and invite in research opportunities. Mm-hmm. So today's episode, as I said, is our last one, and then we'll be excited to announce the next book that we will be featuring at the end of today's book club. And we are excited to just invite you to come keep joining us in our discussions. Our panelists today are all a part of our community, so everyone and anyone is welcome to submit an application to be a panelist. We do invite in a diverse array of representation of age and gender, occupation. There's no limiting qualification, so we truly want to welcome in all voices of different experiences and thoughts. Mm-hmm. And you can find that application on our website. For today's panelists, they have all been with us at one point or another in the previous session. So thank you, panelists, for coming back and joining us. To learn more about them, any single time that they are sharing today, their bio will be dropped in the YouTube chat. So we encourage you to get to know who they are. And we're excited to be with and also thank one of our TRF Alliance members. Our TRF Alliance is a group of other organizations who have similar missions that we're excited to partner with on different programming opportunities. So we are joined today by Bill Brown, who's with the Prison Yoga Project, and they offer prison or trauma-informed programs within prisons, and I think they're in US, Mexico, Canada, Sweden, the Netherlands, the UK, and their mindfulness-based yoga goes directly to prisoners around the world. So thank you, Bill, so much, and to the Prison Yoga Project for all that you bring to the world. And two more things. Thank you for bearing with these important pieces of gratitude, but wanting to just share gratitude to the TRF team, because it takes an entire team to run these programs. Stephanie Kimball has been the program lead, and Laura Walsh is our program manager. Abby, who's with us today, mans all of our customer service. We have Pat Murray, who's our media manager, and gosh, a slew of everyone else that really helps to make this possible. And lastly, our co-moderator for today, Frederick Mann, who also came from community, has been with us since the first book club, and came in as a panelist, is now co-moderator. So thank you so much, Frederick, for being with us. For over 20 years, he's worked with a diverse number of populations and professions as a teacher, an administrator, a consultant, a researcher. He is at the Child Trauma Training Center in the Department of Psychiatry at UMass Chan Medical School, where he's provided assistance and referral support for families, clinicians, educators, and other professionals throughout the state of Massachusetts. He's also trained and facilitated workshops on how to understand trauma, identify trauma triggers and responses, and then effectively support and aid children who have experienced trauma. He's led different things like parent trainings and father support groups, specialized workshops for special needs and disabled children, and designed and implemented short-term therapy and coaching support sessions for court-involved youth. So really amazing cast that we have all involved. And for myself, I'm joining from Northern California. These trees are actually real. You're catching me on the last day that I'll actually be at this house, so it's really wonderful to share it all with you. And I've been with TRF for maybe a year now, and it's just been a wonderful experience. So thank you so much all for joining us. As a reminder, as we go through, we're just about to kick off where we'll open it up to the first question from our panelists. Take a reminder that as we may talk about difficult topics, that you may feel different sensations or things may arise for you. And we always want to remind people to stay resourced, maybe have your feet on the ground, have a hand on your belly to feel the inhale and exhale of your breath. You can also kind of look out and name different sensations or things around your surrounding. So be sure to take good care. All right, with that, we will start it off. Frederick, would you like to call on the first panelist?
So will we use the slides or should we just call on the first person?
Sure, I can totally share the slides.
But I want to say, Chris, thank you for being here, and we appreciate the time difference in Italy, and it's so exciting that you're living your best life now. So that's
really right.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Oh yes, and Chris, we totally had said, would you love to say a couple of words before we dive into our conversation today?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll repeat a little bit what I said earlier, but I just feel so honored to have my book be chosen to be discussed. And as I said earlier, I put my heart and soul into this book, and I wrote the book for a few reasons. I wanted to tell a story of how a person like me gets swept up in the criminal justice system, because there are a bunch of Chris's in this country or around the world that get swept up and end up in prison. The second thing I wanted to do was I wanted to prove that young people, especially young people, lives are redeemable. I was sentenced to an enormous amount of time, and I wanted to prove that I could turn my life around and that I can come home and be successful. And so that was really important. And finally, I was a little, I write about this, but I was really upset about when I chose to turn my life around, how the system is stacked against you in everywhere you turn. And I wanted to prove them wrong by being successful. So I write about a lot of terrible things that happened to me. And I hope that the book serves as a message to people, like we are greater than, a mistake that we made in our past. But also, we could also take these mistakes and turn our lives around and become successful. And that's all relative. It could be, you getting a job and starting a family and going on vacation, whatever it is that you want to do. But I hope that my book inspires people to come up with their own master plan, live a beautiful life, embrace education, go to therapy. And so, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. It's so funny that you share this, and I'm going to bring in the first person, but I want to say that we shared this in one of our sessions, the power of vicarious resilience, and how a person's choice and a person's ability to push through and be strong and be able to overcome it not only empowers and strengthens that person, but it creates a trickle effect for so many others. And in your decision, I know it might seem small, but it was humongous. It was huge, but your story becomes the through lines through many people's lives. But the most important thing that I think I have taken from it is that although something can be so incredibly difficult, so unimaginable, you push through, and somehow the universe, they call it, conspires with you to make it happen.
Yes.
And I just think that is such a powerful story, and it's a powerful truth that is often silenced and ignored. So I want to tell you, it is such an honor to hear your voice, but also to hear your stories of resilience.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let's start. Let's start. Teresa, should we start with the PowerPoint, or how should we go about?
Yeah, looks like Kelly is ahead of the game and has her hand raised.
All right, Kelly, take us away. So this is our space. This is our intimate space. We look forward to the many ways that we will share. So Kelly, share with us.
Thank you. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for writing this book. I was sent an email about this book club by someone who volunteers and supports a program that I work with in my community that's for kids impacted by domestic violence. So we can hopefully try to stop that cycle and kids impacted by other maybe family trauma and violence. So my question is, what did you need as a child? What do you wished maybe who would have been there? What would someone have said? How could someone have supported you or your family, especially during that time? Because it seems like the first kind of thing that maybe set you off on your path was when your mom got with that wrong guy, right? And then who happened to be also a police officer, who was abusing her. So it was like that domestic violence that kind of sent her into a spiral, and then ultimately you. So what do we need to do? What do you wish would have happened for you, Chris, the kid?
Thank you for asking that question. It just triggered a memory of when my book came out. I was on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and that was one of the questions that he asked me. And the response is the same. I remember when my mom, it started with verbal abuse, physical abuse towards my mom, and then to myself and my siblings. And I remember talking to my grandparents, my uncles, anyone who would listen, school counselors, and they didn't really show up to help us. And so what I wished was that people would take it serious. Even my grandmother would say sometimes, just mind your business. People fight and stuff. They'll get back together. That's just how life is. Life is difficult. But my mom was being physically abused and beaten. And I just wish people would have listened to me. And I tried everything that I could do. Even oftentimes I would call the police when things got out of hand, and they just wouldn't do anything. And I just think that, we as a society, we should take domestic violence serious. And it's not just the person, the individual who's suffering from the violence, it's the whole family. And I wish that there was therapy. I wish there was things that all this anger that I had built up inside of me after witnessing years of abuse towards my mom, I wish there was some type of outlet for me where I could talk about it. But it was in my community, people would say, just get over it, just, toughen up. Like, life isn't easy. And I just don't think that's the right approach.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Teresa, I think what you just shared it sounds so simple, and it is, but it's very practical of listening and being present with that person and reaching out versus pushing it away and assuming that it's not your business, because it is everyone's business.
Yeah.
I remember you saying something in your book about how, like, no one said, like, what's going on, Chris, or like what's wrong. Like, And I think sometimes we maybe ask that question to people, but we're expecting them to say like, oh, it's fine. Like, right? Like when people say to you, like, how's it going? How's your day? Like we're expected to just say like, oh, it's fine. Because are they ready for us to really say like, well, let me tell you what's happening in the house. It's all of this and it's all of this and it's all of this and this and this. But I think just maybe getting that conversation going to me is what seemed like would have at least started some help for you.
I agree with you. And it also, I felt I felt it would have been embarrassing for myself to bring stuff up. You know, I also read about there was an incident where my friends were over the house and then my mom's boyfriend smacked her. And he was like, he just smacked your mom. And I was like, no, they're just playing. It's like, they're not playing. And I was embarrassed. And I just wish, I wish that I was better equipped to save my mom. And obviously, like things like this took a toll on my mom with tremendous effects. You know, she never recovered from this damage. And so, but I think about it a lot. I talk about it in therapy now. I go to therapy every week, and so, I revisit like these situations in therapy to talk about it.
Thank you. I'm so glad I read your book. I've been talking about it to everyone. I think it's really important. And you said it earlier on to say that like there are a million other Chris's, right? And like what kind of set you on this path, it could happen really to anyone, right? Any young person that we're working with could potentially end up in your shoes without the right support. So thank you for sharing your story with us.
No problem.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, we will have our next panelist, who is Nadia Davis. Nadia, do you have a question for Chris?
I do. First of all, I'm so honored to meet you. I listened to your book with my son on audio tape as we were driving him to college and moving him into his college dorm. Yeah, so he listened to the whole thing, and just thank you so much for all your brutal honesty.
Thank you.
Very few people have the courage to be that brutally honest. And what I saw was just such resilience in overcoming the shame that resulted in you as a result of the trauma, both as a child and then later as an adult. And we just talked about how your mother, struggled and never really got past what happened to her, and how you just felt embarrassment for the trauma that was occurring in your home. And the power of shame as a core wound from trauma is so difficult in oneself to overcome. And the layers in healing are so much. So then when coupled with outside, so there's shame and then there's shaming, and it makes it that much more difficult. So in our own healing, I do believe it can be a movement to hold the public and the system more accountable for how people are described, especially those that do struggle with trauma and mental health, that do end up in the system, like me, although I'm out. And I've met so many moms who were just in the darkness, in shame, and couldn't get past their addiction and couldn't move on. So my question to you is, I saw you overcome so many times the shame, and when you walked straight into the university and made your proposals, and yet did any public branding of you as a criminal or a delinquent, re-traumatize you? Did it bring you back to the childhood feelings, or did it cause another one? And if so, like, how can we, as a trauma-informed community, start speaking out against how those that do commit crimes that may be struggling with addiction or mental health, how they are portrayed.
Yes, thank you for the question, and I appreciate you reading the book or listening to the book. And actually, the audio book was the most difficult thing, one of the most difficult things I ever had to do in my life. It was so difficult to do, to relive those traumatic experiences. There were times, and it probably came across because I haven't actually listened to the audio book. I just can't. Like, some things are too painful for me. But some things were so painful to get through. It took me 45 minutes to read certain things just to get through a paragraph. But to answer your question, it's one of those things that unfortunately still haunts me. I just got a vacation house in Miami, and I'm renting the house, and I had to go jump through so many hoops. And of course, like, my past revisits me. And for those who don't know me, they would probably just assume the person that they read on paper, or my crime. And that's not who I am. And it's something that everyone who's been impacted by the criminal justice system has to figure out a way to speak about it, to navigate about it. But I think it's important, to your question about what you can do, is having conversations like this where we can talk about the people who've been impacted, and not demonize them. Like, I think about the media and how they constantly, sensationalize crimes. And, I'm a rule of law person, but there's so many people who battle, drug addictions, or been dealt a bad hand in life and end up in prison for significant amounts of time. I think it's important for us to have conversations about what the system in America actually does to people. And I hope that people will be more, they would sympathize more with people in their plights. And then, looking at it from another perspective, economically, we're all taxpaying citizens on this call, and we pay for the incarceration. And the way incarceration functions, it's very punitive, it's solitary confinement. I write about all these conditions behind the fence. And I think if we're paying anyway, that, prisons should have therapy, prisons should have educational opportunities for a majority of the people who've been dealt a bad hand. There should be a path for redemption for people when they come home. And we should understand in this country that some people are dealt a bad hand and things happen. And we should be respectful of the path of them, wanting to get in a job, and just not making it so difficult. It's extremely difficult in this country once you make a mistake to turn your life around, finding housing, getting the right job. And just, the list is endless.
Thank you.
I think everything that you just shared is so powerful, and the wisdom and insights that you've provided, it's like you just shared, it's not rocket science. It's just being, just having humanity and compassion and awareness. Someone wrote in the chat, the path to redemption. Yes. So I want to say, wow, this is such a great insight that you just shared. This is well timed. Not to say that I don't know if you've been following in the news. I know you said you're in Italy right now, but Oprah Winfrey just released her new book club, which she adopted. She's using her platform to discuss prison and prison reform, and she selected a book from an author who is currently incarcerated. But what I find is interesting is that your book and the books that are similar are bringing a voice to say this is no longer something that should be a shame, or something that should be silenced, or something that should be invisible, that this matters to us all. This is about humanity. So I think, similar to the 1930s, when we didn't know about what was happening in the slaughterhouses, and people began to write about the what was happening to the food, how food was being produced. this could be the beginning of a movement towards, uncovering the insanity. So I'm excited and I'm hopeful because this is well received. So thank you for that. Thank you. We have Bill. Bill, would you share with us your question?
Thank you, Chris.
I mean, my heart is racing right now, for so many different reasons. I listened to the book as well, and so I spent 10 hours with you, having you tell me in this incredibly vivid and raw presentation. And when you mention, you're like, I'm sure it comes through. It does. And I found myself throughout listening to the book having to take time for myself, what I recognize, in this work, that this is vicarious trauma that I'm experiencing through hearing your story. And so I had to lean into my practice, and my practice is to use the body to discharge that. And I heard you answer earlier, that one of the things that you would have needed was some pathway to deal with that anger that's built up inside you. And I feel like, as you were describing the earlier part of your childhood up to the moment, I could feel this pressure and this sense of disconnection that happened in that night. And then, of course, you have the ongoing experience of being in the prison and jail, which that environment is trauma on top of trauma. And so, and you mentioned that in recording the book, it was difficult for you to get through telling these stories. And this is one of the things that we like to do with our programming is, we're working directly with the body as a way to release that trauma without having to go through the story and, avoiding that process of re-traumatization. So I'm just wondering, do you have practices for working with that trauma that is, that built up in your body, and what opportunities were there, if any, that you had in prison to access that kind of trauma healing?
I think my experience in prison, I was lucky to have access to therapy, which I did my entire incarceration. So for about 16 years at least, I was in therapy. That helped me understand myself. It helped me understand the world a little better. It helped me understand my relationship with my mother. Uh, I dedicated my book to my mom. I write about how rich our relationship was, and the things that she instilled in me about treating women nice and entrepreneurship and all these different things, and then how our relationship had changed after she had been attacked. And I was upset with her. I was angry about losing that relationship with the person that I loved the most.
Mm-hmm.
And that anger stayed with me for many, many years, even while I was incarcerated. And some of the things that she would say to me when I was in prison, and the things she would put in letters, frequently, that I would get from her. But at a certain point, I started to understand through therapy that hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understood that my mom was hurting. And so I didn't take the things that she said to me personally anymore. And, I guess I grew up a little bit and became a little bit more mature, and just sympathizing with her illness. My mom, because of all the stuff that she'd been through, but she needed help. She didn't get the help that she needed. And in the letter that she left me, she just talked about, she felt really bad that she failed us as a mom. And, she wished she could have done better. But, I choose to remember her by the positive things and the good times. And so, but that experience helps me understand when I work with people today and the work that I do today of people who experience tremendous amounts of trauma that's hurt and uh, they oftentimes project like feelings towards people and it's not real. And so so I look at things now from a different lens. You had another question, right? Or a secondary question, right?
Well,
Of
I guess
how
yeah. I'm wondering, and I want to lean in, I guess, to something that you named, Frederick, of vicarious resilience, because even while I'm experiencing your story and feeling my own body embodied reaction and frustration and the anger at so many of the situations that you experience, particularly your caseworker after release, I mean,
yeah,
this is the person who's supposed to, should, if our system was functioning, have your back, and be applauding you and raising you up for everything that you're doing. This vicarious resilience, even through that resistance, you prevail, and that.
so I think it's important for me to say this though. I did, but I didn't do it alone. And I
Mm,
don't think I think I don't think it's realistic to believe that anyone can prevail in situations like that on their own. I mean, there were phone calls that I made. I remember requesting therapy sessions, which they denied. And I said, well, I know that I have to go to NA and AA. And I found solace in like just going to NA and AA and people talking to me. That became my therapy session. And then people that I can call. And that's how I got through. And I think that's how most people get through things by having some type of emotional support system. And that's how I got through it. I am tough. I believe I'm tough and resilient and optimistic. I just don't believe I could have got through it by myself.
Yeah. Community, echo Kelly, community. Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Chris. And thanks for your contribution. This is required reading for everybody working in our organization now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chris. Just want to give some space for those joining us online to share some of their thoughts. From Priscilla, they said that they really loved your term of returning citizen. Language is so important. So I think that goes back to the last question around how people are branded.
Yes.
And another from Debbie, she just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. She plans to share it at the maximum security prison where she's a volunteer chaplain and maybe even start a book club if they let her. So
Thank you
for that. Thank you for the virtual audience. And also just to say, Chris, sometimes you're sharing these really complex aspects, the empathy or understanding of what your mother was going through. Like just that piece, the amount of internal emotional work that has to happen from that point A to point B is really complex. And then also, the noting the aspect of projection. So, sometimes we read it in the book, but the emotional experience and work and processing that has to go to get you where you're at is immense. And on that note, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping is to try and keep us all on time and make sure everyone gets their questions asked. That to ask when you're asking your question, though there's a desire to elaborate, if you can try and keep the question direct so that we have more space for Chris to answer, that'd be great. Just from the moderator, but you can project any aggravation that you have. So great. Our next question is from Kita. Please, what is your question for Chris?
Hey, what up, Chris? It's Keita.
Yeah.
Welcome to the space. It's such an honor to share this space with you, with everyone. I'm going to jump right into the question, but I also just want to remind people, because we're all in this maybe prison reform or looking at it, it's important that I heard someone say, it's just anybody, but that's not always true. We really have to be careful because Black and brown people overrepresented within the prison population. So it's not just anybody. And that also comes for returning citizens in terms of the feedback. Sometimes just anybody gets that pass for white body culture, whereas black and brown body culture don't get that pass, if you know what I mean. So I just wanted to bring that into full circle. My question has to do with, it's around two things. You talk about luck, but luck in terms of thinking about that, what advice would you share? Right now I'm working with a young man who's incarcerated at 17 with multiple life sentences, and I gave him your book. But what advice would you share, this idea of luck and legal advice and physical advice, emotional advice, to help him navigate and advocate for himself within that prison politics, and to help maintain his sanity? Like, I know it's packed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a deep question. So I would say that, hope, I mean, people use the word often, right? But like hope was really instrumental in my motivation, in my mindset, just having some hope and believing. And so I guess I can speak only to how I interpreted my situation and how I coped with it to get through it. And I just started thinking about, I call it a positive delusion in my book. So what I wrote about is I had to believe that one day, I knew it would be a long time, but I had to believe that one day I would have a moment where I could be honest, I could prove that my life was redeemable and I would have a second chance. And people thought I was crazy, but I chose to believe it, and it was the only way I can get up in the morning and go to school and go to therapy and just dedicate my life to rehabilitation, was by believing this delusion. And I think it's important for people that are in that space. I call it rock bottom. You're at rock bottom, you got multiple life sentences, your family members probably aren't visiting you the way they used to, you're not getting mail and letters. And so it's a tough space. And I think this is the time when you got to really dig deep down to yourself to find that switch, to figure out, even if it is the end for you, how is it that you want to spend the rest of your life? I believe that I will have a moment to be free again. But I also thought about, if I didn't get out, how do I want to conduct myself in here? And I used books, for example, reading books and studying as a way to escape mentally, and just travel around the world, and through Africa, and go through like history, and read up on all kinds of stuff. But I would encourage this person to find that switch, or like that belief. And it's very, very tough. There were moments where I would be focused for 3 years and study. I'll be in college and get out and take more courses, and I would lose it. But I was smart enough to surround myself with old heads and some people who never probably get out of prison, but they saw my potential. And they used to tell me, we're going to look out for you, little Chris, and you are going to get out, because a person like you don't belong in here. And when you get out and you be successful, we're going to live through you. And I still talk to these people to these days, and some have come home. But I would encourage that person to surround themselves with positive people like that, and just never lose hope, work your case. And another thing, that this is more like a more tangible, specific thing that I used to say to people that I used to mentor, say, just staying out of trouble isn't enough. Just telling a judge or a parole officer that you've changed isn't enough. Mm-hmm. You gotta prove it through your actions, through your behavior. If you say that you turn your life around, or you want to, how? What is it that you've done while in prison? Education-wise, therapy, and not just staying out of trouble. And also, what is your plan when you have your shot? I was confronted with a situation where it's like, all right, I had a second chance. Like, well, you got to finish everything that you said you was going to do. And now I have a relationship with my judge now, and we talk about this. And my relationship with my judge and my case has changed the minds of a lot of judges in the state of Maryland. And a few people have came home who created their own master plans. And so I would encourage this person to just like, don't give up hope, but like put the work in to show if you feel like you deserve a second chance, prove it, put the work in, and hopefully it works out for them.
Thank you. Chris, I have both the book and the recorded, and I want to tell people, get the recorded. Hear it in your words is 10 times the power, and I could hear you holding back some of the emotions in some of the chapters. You know what I'm talking about. So I just want to say, get the audio too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have about 20 minutes, and this is like, I'm so we want to bring in more voices. And so we're going to go quickly through what we want to just thank you. This has just been, I want to say delicious because I'm hungry right now, but I want to say this has been great. So, Aktura, I hope I did it. Yes. You're next, and we're gonna move through. But Chris, we have so much we want to say, but this has been amazing so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
I listened to your book as well. So thank you for doing that, because I don't read books often. I often listen to them. So somebody like me may have not had the opportunity to hear your story had you not done that. So thank you for being vulnerable in that space. My question, I have two, so I'm going to let you pick which one you want to answer or answer both. So the first one is, as a person who's in favor of removing life sentence for children who commit violent crimes, what would you say to someone like me, who, though in support of that, is on the fence when it comes to a recent case like one we have here in North Florida regarding the murder of 14-year-old Tristan Bailey and the 14-year-old teen Aiden Fucci, who's alleged of taking her life violently? So what would you say to people that are in favor of not removing life sentences for children, but when it comes to something like that, maybe sort of on the fence about that? The other question is, and I wrote these down, many books like yours that tell the story of racial disparity are currently being banned from school systems. What are your thoughts on this as well? So.
Okay. I'm gonna start with the latter. I would say that, it's scary about, banning books and talking about racism and American history. So I do take issue with that. I think we can't heal as a country until we accept our past, and what America has done. Like, it's a country that's been formed based off of slavery, and we gotta come to terms with all of these things. It's the only way we move forward, is what I would say to that. I think banning books and education, or just books that speak to this is the problem. I heard that Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, is banned in a lot of prisons and jails. I think this is only a matter of time for everyone to understand and hopefully comes to terms about what America has done as a country. And about the life sentence and the unfortunate loss of a young person. I mean, again, like, I am a person that is of rule and law, and I feel like people should be punished if they commit terrible crimes. But I sympathize with the family. I also just want to say that, oftentimes, and I grew up behind the fence, oftentimes, we think about the crime and the person, and it's easy to call someone like that a monster. But we don't often think about how many times our communities or the system or families has failed these people before they committed a crime like that. And so, I just hope that as a community, as a country, that we become more preemptive and putting systems in place where we can prevent stuff from happening. Bullying in school, and then, big surprise, someone shows up at school and shoots the school up. Like, we gotta like nip stuff in the bud. And so that's my hope.
Thank you for answering my questions, and thank you for sharing your story with the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have
our next.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I just was going to say the same thing. Karen, would you like to ask next? Can we hear you, Karen? Looks like we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that. The microphone works better when it's on. So Chris, thank you for being our guest. I wanted to say that your book was extremely emotional for me. One of my
Thank you.
first jobs as a social worker was in inner city DC with young people of color. And I got to see firsthand the struggle, the traumas. So my question for you today is, what symptoms do you still have from your traumatic history? Because it was wild how much trauma as a little young person you had. It was pretty overwhelming to read. So what are your current symptoms and how are you healing from those still? Thank you.
An interesting question, which I just talked about with some of my godparents a little while ago. So nightmares. I had a nightmare on the plane a few days ago. And the nightmare was that I was back in prison, that I had never been released. And I freaked out and I woke up and everybody was staring at me asking me, was I okay? So I still battle with that PTSD. I go to therapy once a week. I exercise. I'm real careful with my diet to kind of manage myself. But I do have to understand that I have been wounded. I spent a significant amount of time in solitary confinement. I can be awkward at sometimes socially, being around people. But I think, and I credit my therapist with helping me develop and understand myself in the world and developing coping mechanisms, positive coping mechanisms of how I can just navigate life. But it also reminds me that so many people in this country don't have access to any of these resources and are just drifting and not getting what they need. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. But I still battle. My life is great though. Don't get me wrong. I live a beautiful life. I'm living my best life, but it's not easy, and I struggle with stuff. My scars are now invisible, but they're there.
Yeah. How could they not be, right? So thank you for answering so honestly.
Thank you so much. In order to give more space for people, I'm going to call on Jess. Thank you, Chris. Jess?
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for writing such an amazing book. I just want to say I'm a certified trauma support specialist and a peer support specialist with a focus on supporting those impacted by incarceration. So I can say that your book was very engaging. I couldn't put it down. There was tears. There was, so I just felt the need, like, I got to get this book in our Alaska carceral system, right? Like, this book has to be read by everybody. So just the real and the rawness of it. I want to know, my question to you is, like, what would you tell the public? Well, obviously, like, you have been speaking to the public through this book, right? But what is something that you think that is really crucial for the community to know about incarceration? Because we live with this stigma, right? And I'm ready to break that stigma down like the Kool-Aid man breaking through the wall. But what would you tell people out there about incarceration that's not really being told and not really being spoke about?
I think that my top two things that I would say is education and therapy would give the best returns for taxpayers' dollars and will vastly reduce the recidivism rate. Those would be the first two things I would say. It sounds counterintuitive. People say, well, why do you get to go like take vocational classes or college? Well, my kids had to, go into debt like to do it. And oftentimes there's explanations behind that of people who've been dealt a bad hand, who just didn't go to a bad school, lived in a bad neighborhood. I'm sure like, people that you work with. And as a society, we should correct it. It's America. Like, we have the resources to do it, and it actually protects the public and makes us safe. And when a person comes home from prison after receiving therapy and education, they won't recidivate. And that money that we save, we put that into our schools and keep people from going to prison in the first place. It's not rocket science, as someone said earlier in this call.
Thank you so much. Yes, I totally agree with you. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.
Thank you, Jess. I'm also just realizing that typically we go until 5:30 and that this one we're only going until 5. So we're going to be a little shorter on our typical length of questions. And I'm sorry if any panelist doesn't get to share, but this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. So next, Amanda, I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Chris. Your book meant so much to me on so many levels. We share similar experiences with different types of abuses and traumas, with the rapid deceleration and devaluation of like our moms, especially in those. So the resonance I shared in the first week when I was a panelist, well, we didn't, my oldest son didn't come exactly from these things. The trauma he experienced from my trauma set him on a course that nearly landed him in prison. So it's all, the impact of your story obviously can't be overstated. And the courage that you have in speaking so raw and honestly in order to make sure that you're impacting and changing other lives is just astounding. And you actually, I'm going to kind of pass because you kind of answered some questions that I've had and reading. There's a couple of really good ones, but I want to just thank you and express my gratitude towards you.
Appreciate it, sister. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Walker, would you ask the next question?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you. Yes, I share the sentiments of so many prior to me. When I look back at your childhood, obviously you were in a school system. A lot of things, you were connected to a lot of systems prior to your experiences at 16, 17 years old. How do you believe treatment providers, those that had access to you on a day-to-day basis, how do you believe they could have met your need better when you think about the path that you had to cross?
That's a really good question. And side note, I appreciate that you are sitting on top of the world right now. I think about this a lot, right? I work with service providers and therapists and stuff in the prisons all around the country now. And I can say that there are some people who this is just their job. And then there's others where this is mission-driven work. Like they care about these the people that they work with. Like this is their life's purpose. And I've seen it. I go into Rikers Island twice a month in New York, and there's a therapist there or a counselor who goes to unit to unit, the most dangerous units, whatever. Everyone respects her. I mean, she works really hard. They listen to her. She gets people to go to school and read and all that. You gotta really, like, this work is so important, and you gotta really care about it. And not everyone cares about it like that. And I think that's what I would say to the I write about my therapist who did a lot for me when I was incarcerated, but at the end of the day, it was just like, I'm done here, and this is just a job for me, and just left. You gotta care. You gotta really care, and that's what I think. That's what I think it takes, and that's what it took for me to turn my life around. Is having people who just like, they're not related to me. They giving me the hard truth. Sometimes I didn't like what they had to say. So if you want to go on this road, it's your choice. But like, I needed to hear that. And people need that hard truth. People need to be able to understand that you have to develop agency over yourself. Therapists and social workers, it's not their role or responsibility to save you or tell you what to do. They help us understand ourselves so we can make the right decisions to do good for ourselves and for our communities. That's how I interpret it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really good thoughts from you, Chris. Thank you so much. We're going to take two more in our discussion today because we're just coming up on the hour. Lisa, please join us. Oh, Dorian, you'll go next, but if we can have Lisa on first.
Mr. Wilson, my Lord, when I read your book, my goodness, it's amazing that you're here. It's absolutely wonderful that you were able to share. And I have a lot of questions like most people, but one of them, from one author to another, there's always something that you look back after you've written your book and you say, I wonder if I should have added that, or I wish I had included this, or for my follow-up, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So Chris, I have to say that one of the points in your book, of the many, when you still finished your term paper after being locked away, that blew me away. So I don't know if that's a part of, what you're going to do next, but I just really wanted to know what else, what would you have liked to include that maybe you didn't for whatever reason?
So I will say that I think when I turned the book in, it was 77,000 words, and when I turned in, it was 125,000 words. We narrowed it down. They wanted 75,000. I think it ended in 77,000 words. It was a lot of stuff that I cut out that didn't make it into the book. Really powerful stories that I wish I would have put in there. Some were sad. People that I mentored, that I helped get their dream jobs, that ended up with cancer at a young age and passed away, and I sat with them on their last moments. Just a lot of stories that I wish I could have put into the book. But I do plan to write 2 more books, actually. And so part of on my vacation here in Italy, I have been working on my second book. So the things that didn't make it in, I'll get them in. But overall, I'm very happy with what ended up in the book, the final result.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sister.
So
I just wanted to make sure, or just right before we go on, Chris, we're at the hour, so just want to be mindful of your time.
Yeah.
Do you have time for one last question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great.
It's 11 o'clock over here too, so I'm I got it. But yeah, of course I got time for one more question.
Great. Dorian.
Yeah, I'm a music therapist, so if you need any, lullaby music right now, like totally got you covered.
I need some house music. That's what I need.
Oh, yeah. If you need me to wake you up, because you're about to go out, like I can do that too. But yeah. So, first and foremost, I wanted to tell you just that I'm not going to mention the individual, but I have an individual in my family who I recommended your book to, who is literally having a political shift towards the way that they're viewing the prison industrial complex. And it's something that I've been talking to this individual about for nearly a decade. And there's just been a mental block, and you literally are the first space that has cracked this this shell. And it was so like seriously, like mad props for that. And then secondly, like, I don't want to diminish your skills or abilities, because you obviously have them, but the thing that I really appreciated about your book was just the concept of luck being involved, because like a lot of us work within the prison system, and there are thousands of Chris Wilsons, and it's like, yes, like there's a huge amount of dedication, and there is accountability and a lot of work that needs to be put into it, but there's also social workers who are out to destroy you. There are the system itself is on you. So like I just was really blown away that you addressed the luck factor, because there are too many people trapped inside. But the question I wanted to ask is, Man, my questions are really heavy, so I'm gonna ask a really, really easy
Go ahead.
question because
Last question.
I'm a music therapist, and you wrote a lot about music. You know, you talked about
Yes.
using Pac and using Wu-Tang Clan and all those folks. So like, what was your
Havana,
relationship?
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was your relationship with music while being inside? I'm curious about
It
that.
was, I mean, and first let me say, I mean, I listen to I listen to house, I listen to everything really, but like house music, I listen to the most. But while inside music, it was a lot of, it was a mix of music, but it allowed my imagination to wander, and I would just envision. I did a bunch of scrapbooking and vision boards, and I would listen to my music, and I could see myself in the place that I am in today, like on this island in this nice hotel with a cool car out front. But the music helped me envision a life that I didn't have. And I can't imagine living in a world that didn't have music. I mean, it's crazy. Who would do that?
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. And that's such a nice, wonderful note. I wish we had like a cue music and it would start. But thank you all so much. And Chris, I think to echo everyone, it's been amazing to hear your story, for those who listened in on audio, to hear those emotions and the ways that you tell your story and all of the aspects that go into it, from your own journey to your family to the system complex and the resiliency and the surrendering and the grief, like all of it that went into it. And your ability to share those pieces in your story, and also the vulnerability that it takes to really put yourself out there, like the first time you went on that podcast, is immense. So thank you so much for coming out and doing that again and continuing to share a story. Happy to hear that your next book, whenever that comes out, we'll have a book club round 2.
Yes.
And hope to
Yes.
invite everyone back.
Yes.
I just want to invite Frederick and then yourself to share any last words before we close out.
Okay. Frederick, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just want to say, I know you've heard all this. I think it's one thing that I think is quite fascinating we haven't talked about, but you talked a lot about indirectly the power of the connection of various men and how they have influenced you, and you as a man, how you have influenced, like you've broken a lot of the stereotypes and also the misidentification of how men can support one another. I want to say, as another man, I think that was so remarkable in the ways in which you showed up. So I thank you for that. I just want to say, your story has become so many people's stories, and you've opened up our imagination, but you have also opened up our ability to be compassionate and aware. So I think that is the greatest gift that you can leave. So I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I guess what I would say in closing is I want to thank you all for making time to speak with me this evening or this night over here, because it's 11:06. But I also, like, if you guys can, as a favor, can you guys leave some reviews on like Amazon or something for the book or whatever? I'm currently talking to my publishing company and talking about my second book. And it'll be really helpful, even if it's a bad review, but I hope it's not. But just if you leave some reviews, and if you guys are interested in what I'm doing now, I'm a visual artist, globe-trotting all around the world and making art that's about important issues, mostly what we talked about today. Please follow me on Instagram, Chris Wilson's Life. I share all my travels, all my art shows and design projects. And so I would love to have you all join me on my journey as I navigate life.
Thank you. And is there anything you wanted to share about the Chris Wilson Foundation?
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I was about to get to that. Yeah, so Chris Wilson Foundation, I could be You can learn more about it at chriswilsonfoundation.com. And we focus a lot on prison education. We've turned the book actually into a course, which is in 22 states and over 100 jails and prisons. And it helps individuals deal with trauma, deal with rock bottom moments, embracing education, and thinking about what the end game is and creating their own master plan. And so I feel like this is definitely my life's work in doing this. And so I encourage everyone, if you want to learn more about it, check us out online at chriswilsonfoundation.com. And if you have the means to support or connect us with folks who want to support the program that we're doing, please do so.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a wonderful time to get to spend together. Thank you for your time upon time of everything you've put in for other people to get to be helped from your journeys. And thank you to the entire community who's been tuning in. It's always wonderful to have you a part here at the conversation, the panelists, the TRF team, Stephanie, Laura, Pat, Abby, and then we have so many other people in the team that make everything possible. And yeah, we hope that you'll join us for our next book club. And just to do a quick announcement here is that the next book we'll be featuring is The Politics of Trauma by Stacey Haynes. So thank you again, Chris, so much. We look forward to having you back when that new book is out. And yeah, everyone get on your socials and leave those reviews, because that's great.
Thank you so much.